The 9-year silence ended the day Caleb Hayes rode back into Pine Hollow, and Evelyn Mercer's carefully rebuilt world shattered in an instant. One letter, one lie, 9 stolen years. This is the story of a woman who survived abandonment in the harshest frontier town in the territory, only to discover the man she hated had been destroyed by the same betrayal. If you want to know how far revenge, forgiveness, and second chances can take 2 broken people, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The first crack appeared in Evelyn Mercer's carefully constructed armor on a Tuesday morning when Martha Blackwell leaned across the trading post counter and whispered 6 words that changed everything. Caleb Hayes is back in town. Evelyn's hands stopped mid-motion. She'd been wrapping brown paper around Mrs. Henderson's flower order, the string cutting into her calloused fingers the way it did every morning, every season, every damn year for the past 9. The paper crinkled. The flower dust hung suspended in the shaft of weak sunlight filtering through the storefront window. What did you say? What did you? Martha's eyes gleamed with that particular hunger small-town gossips get when they're the first to deliver devastating news. Saw him myself, rode in about an hour ago, stopped at the livery stable, asked Ben Crawford about lodging. Older now, rougher. But it's him, Evelyn. It's definitely him. The string slipped through Evelyn's fingers. The package fell open, scattering flour across the scarred wooden counter in a cloud of white dust that settled like ash. 9 years. 9 years of silence. 9 years of unanswered questions. 9 years of building walls so high and thick that nothing, not loneliness, not judgment, not the crushing weight of running a failing business, while her father slowly died upstairs, could break through. And now Caleb Hayes had the audacity to just ride back into Pine Hollow like he hadn't destroyed her. Evelyn? Martha's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. You all right, honey? Fine. The word came out flat, dead. I'm fine. She wasn't fine. She hadn't been fine since the morning she woke up to find Caleb gone without a word, without a note, without even the basic human decency to tell her he was leaving. Just his horse missing from the stable and a void where her future used to be. Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat from the corner where she'd been pretending not to listen. I'll come back later for that flower, dear. No. Evelyn's hands moved automatically, rewrapping the package with mechanical precision. Here, $2 even. The transaction completed itself. The women left. The bell above the door chimed its tinny goodbye. And Evelyn stood alone behind the counter of Mercer's trading post, surrounded by the inventory her father could no longer manage and the life she'd never wanted but had been forced to accept. The rage came first, hot and acidic, burning up from her stomach into her throat. Then the fear, because anger she could handle, anger she'd perfected over 9 long years, but the fear meant she still cared, and that was unacceptable. Evie, her father's voice drifted down from upstairs, weak and crackling. That's you down there. It's me, Papa. She forced her voice steady. Just the morning customers. Go back to sleep. She heard his cough, wet and rattling, followed by the creak of bed springs as he settled back down. Doc Brennan had stopped pretending there was anything to be done about 6 months ago. Keep him comfortable, he'd said, which was doctor speak for start preparing yourself. Evelyn had been preparing herself for loss since she was 22 years old. She was damn good at it by now. The morning stretched on. She served customers. She smiled when required. She made change and wrapped packages and recommended products and pretended the entire foundation of her world hadn't just shifted beneath her feet. But by noon, when Sarah Chen came in asking about lamp oil and casually mentioned she'd seen Caleb heading toward the old horse stables on the eastern edge of town, Evelyn made a decision. She flipped the closed sign, grabbed her shawl, and walked out into the harsh spring sunlight. Pine Hollow sprawled across the valley like a scar. The town had grown around the trading routes, then gotten stuck when the railroad chose a different path through the territory. What remained was a collection of desperate people clinging to desperate dreams in a place that had stopped caring about either. Evelyn knew every inch of it. Every saloon where men drank away their failures. Every church where women pretended prayer could fix what was broken. Every back alley where deals went down that polite society pretended not to notice. She'd survived here alone. She'd earned her place. And she'd be damned if Caleb Hayes thought he could just wander back and upend everything she'd built from the wreckage he'd left behind. The walk to the eastern stables took 15 minutes, long enough for her anger to crystallize into something colder, harder, long enough to rehearse a dozen different opening lines, each more cutting than the last. The stables had been abandoned for 3 years, ever since Marcus Webb died and his sons moved east. The building sagged like a drunk, all rotted wood and missing shingles, and the smell of decay that settled over everything left too long untended. Caleb stood in the doorway. 9 years had changed him. The boy who'd left at 26 had been lean and restless, all nervous energy and big dreams about making something of himself out in the wider territory. The man who'd returned was built different, broader through the shoulders, harder in the face, scarred along his left jawline in a way that spoke of violence survived rather than avoided. But his eyes? Those hadn't changed. Still that impossible shade of gray-blue that reminded her of storm clouds rolling over the mountains. Still capable of seeing straight through whatever walls she put up. He saw her the moment she rounded the corner. His entire body went rigid. Evelyn. Just her name. Nothing else. Like 9 years of silence could be bridged with a single word. Don't! She stopped 10 feet away, close enough to see him clearly, but far enough to maintain the illusion of control. Don't you dare say my name like you have any right to it. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or guilt. She didn't care enough to identify it precisely. I know you're angry. Oh, angry? The laugh that escaped her throat sounded broken even to her own ears. You think I'm angry? Caleb, I buried angry about 6 years ago. What I am now is done. Completely and utterly done with whatever this is. I can explain. No. She took a step forward, years of suppressed fury lending strength to her voice. You can't. There's no explanation good enough for 9 years of silence. No excuse that makes abandonment acceptable. No words that undo what you did. He flinched, actually flinched, like she'd struck him physically instead of just verbally. I didn't abandon you. You left without a word. Because I thought... He stopped, jaw clenching. Because I was told you didn't want me here anymore. The world tilted slightly. What? Caleb reached into his jacket, worn leather, scarred and patched in places, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Age yellowed, creased from being opened and closed too many times. I was told, he said slowly, each word careful, that you'd moved on, that you wanted me gone, that staying would only make things harder for you. Evelyn stared at the letter. Told by who? Victor. The name landed like a physical blow. Victor Hale. Their friend. The third point in their triangle of shared history, growing up in Pine Hollow. Victor, who'd always been there. Victor, who'd helped her through the first terrible months after Caleb vanished. Victor, who still ran the grain supply business on the south side of town and asked about her father every time she saw him. No. But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Victor wouldn't... Read it. Caleb held out the letter. His hand shook slightly. Please. She didn't want to take it. Taking it meant acknowledging this might be more complicated than the simple narrative she'd built. Taking it meant her anger might need a new target. Taking it meant 9 years of carefully constructed understanding might crumble. She took it. The paper felt fragile between her fingers. The handwriting was instantly recognizable. Victor's neat, precise script that had always been so different from Caleb's rushed scrawl. Caleb, I'm writing this because Evelyn asked me to, and because you deserve honesty even if the truth is hard. She's moved on. The plans you two made don't fit her life anymore. She's running the store now, taking care of her father, and she needs stability, not a drifter chasing dangerous work across the territory. She didn't want to tell you herself because she doesn't want the guilt of holding you back, but she needs you to go, for both your sakes. The kindest thing you can do is leave quietly and let her build the life she deserves. I'll look after her. You have my word on that. Victor Evelyn read it twice, then a third time, because surely she'd missed something. Some indication that this was a forgery or a misunderstanding or anything except what it appeared to be. But the handwriting was Victor's. The paper stock matched what he'd used for business correspondence back then. Even the phrasing, that careful, formal way he structured sentences, was authentically him. I never asked him to write this. Her voice sounded distant, unfamiliar. I never said any of this. I know that now. Caleb's jaw worked. Took me about 7 years to figure it out, and another 2 to find proof. That letter was hidden in Victor's old office files. He'd kept it. Don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe just carelessness. The implications crashed over her in waves. Victor had lied. Victor had manipulated both of them. Victor had destroyed 9 years of their lives for, what, jealousy? Control? Some twisted version of protection? When did you find this? 4 months ago. Been working up the courage to come back ever since. 4 months. He'd known the truth for 4 months, and she'd still been walking around believing Caleb had chosen to abandon her. Still greeting Victor in town like he was a friend. Still accepting his help and his concern, and his presence in her life like he hadn't committed the cruelest betrayal imaginable. The rage returned, but different now, colder, more focused. I need to sit down. There was a half-rotted barrel near the stable entrance. Evelyn lowered herself onto it before her legs could give out. Caleb stayed standing, keeping that careful distance between them like he wasn't sure if she'd attack or collapse. Why didn't you question it? The words came out sharper than she intended. Why didn't you come back and ask me yourself? Pain flickered across his features. Real pain, the kind that lived deep in someone's bones. Because part of me believed it. Believed I wasn't good enough for you. That you deserve better than a man who made his living breaking horses and guiding supply trains through dangerous country. Victor just confirmed what I already feared. So you ran. I left, he corrected quietly. There's a difference. Is there? Running implies cowardice. I left because I thought I was doing the right thing, the noble thing, giving you space to build a better life without me dragging you down into mine. Evelyn laughed, but there was no humor in it. And how did that work out for you? Terribly. He said it simply, matter of fact. Spent 9 years moving from job to job, town to town, trying to outrun the guilt of walking away from the only person who ever mattered. Didn't work, couldn't work, because everywhere I went, you were there in my head asking why I'd left. She wanted to hate him for that, wanted to rage at him for suffering when she'd been the one left behind to manage a dying business, and a dying father, and a town full of people who'd watched her get abandoned and drew their own ugly conclusions. But looking at him now, really looking, past the anger and hurt, she could see the truth written in every hard line of his face. Caleb Hayes had spent 9 years in his own private hell, believing he'd done the right thing by leaving her alone. They'd both been victims of the same lie. The realization didn't make the anger disappear, didn't heal 9 years of damage, but it shifted something, created space for possibility where before there'd only been certainty. Victor, she said the name like a curse. Why would he do this? I have theories. Caleb finally moved, leaning against the stable wall with the weariness of someone who'd carried a heavy load too long. He loved you. Maybe not the way I did, but in his own way. And he was scared of losing both of us. So he made sure we'd lose each other instead. That's insane. That's jealousy. Caleb met her eyes. People do insane things when they're scared of being left behind. The irony wasn't lost on her. Victor had feared abandonment so much that he'd created it for everyone else, a self-fulfilling prophecy of the cruelest kind. I should have questioned it, Caleb continued, each word heavy with regret. Should have demanded to hear it from you directly. Should have fought harder. But I was young and stupid and convinced that loving you meant letting you go if that's what you needed. I never needed that. The admission cost her something, pride maybe, or the safety of self-righteous anger. I needed you to stay, to fight for us, to trust that we could figure things out together. I know that now. 9 years too late. He nodded slowly. 9 years too late. They sat in silence. Around them, Pine Hollow continued its daily rhythm, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the creak of wagon wheels on rutted streets, the low murmur of voices from the saloon 2 blocks over. Life moving forward while they remained frozen in the wreckage of the past. Evelyn studied the letter again, the careful script, the calculated lies wrapped in concern. Victor had been methodical in his betrayal, strategic. He'd identified their weaknesses, Caleb's insecurity about his worth, her father's declining health, the pressure of running the store, and exploited all of them with surgical precision. "What are you going to do?" Caleb asked finally. "I don't know." She folded the letter carefully, creasing it along the original lines. "Part of me wants to march straight to his grain house and burn it to the ground with him inside. That's fair. Part of me wants to scream until my throat bleeds. Also fair. And part of me—" She stopped, surprised by the truth of what she was about to say. "Part of me just wants to understand why. What could possibly make a person destroy two lives like this?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of hard-won understanding. "Fear, probably. Fear makes people do terrible things, makes them cruel when they mean to be kind, makes them destroy what they claim to love." "You sound like you're speaking from experience." "I am." He pushed off from the wall, moving slowly like he expected her to bolt. "I let fear drive me away from you 9 years ago. Believed Victor's letter because I was terrified that staying would ruin your life. Fear turned me into a coward dressed up as a martyr." The honesty of it struck something raw inside her. Here was Caleb Hayes admitting his failures without excuse or justification, not begging forgiveness, not demanding absolution, just offering truth, naked and undefended. It was more than she'd gotten from anyone in 9 years. "I'm not ready to forgive you." The words came out quieter than intended. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready. 9 years is a long time to carry hurt." "I know. And I'm definitely not ready to forgive Victor. I wouldn't expect you to be. But—" She hesitated, testing the words before speaking them aloud. "But I think I'm ready to hear your side. All of it. What happened after you left, where you went, what you did, why you came back now instead of 4 months ago when you found the letter." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Not hope exactly. He was too worn down for that. But maybe the faint possibility of hope. The recognition that she wasn't slamming the door completely. "It's not a pretty story. I'm not looking for pretty." Evelyn stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "I'm looking for true." They walked back toward town together, keeping careful distance between them. Not touching, barely speaking, but together nonetheless, which was more than they'd been in 9 years. The sun had climbed higher, casting harsh light across Pine Hollow's weathered buildings. Evelyn could see people watching from windows and doorways, could practically hear the whispers starting. Evelyn Mercer and Caleb Hayes, walking together after all this time. The gossip would spread like wildfire. Let it spread. She was done living her life according to other people's expectations. At the corner of Main Street, Caleb stopped. "The old boarding house still standing? The one Mrs. Patterson ran?" "She died 3 years back. Her daughter runs it now, Clara. She'll rent you a room." He nodded, started to turn away, then hesitated. "Evelyn, thank you for listening, for not just shooting me on sight." Despite everything, a small smile tugged at her lips. Day's not over yet. She left him there and headed back to the trading post. Her father would be awake by now, wondering where she'd gone. The afternoon customers would need serving. Life would continue demanding her attention whether she was ready to give it or not. But as she walked, letters still folded in her pocket, Evelyn felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness, not healing, but maybe the first crack in the armor she'd built so carefully. Because for 9 years, she'd believed Caleb Hayes had abandoned her by choice, had built her entire understanding of the world around that betrayal, had convinced herself she was better off alone, stronger for having survived his desertion. And now she knew the truth. They'd both been victims, both been manipulated, both spent 9 years suffering under the weight of lies neither of them had chosen. The anger remained. The hurt was still there, sharp and present. But underneath it all, buried deep beneath years of scar tissue, was a question she'd never allowed herself to ask before. What if they'd both been wrong about each other all along? The trading post was chaos when she returned. 3 customers waiting, her father calling weekly from upstairs, and a delivery driver demanding someone sign for a shipment that had apparently been sitting in the back since morning. Evelyn slipped back into routine automatically. Served customers. Signed forms. Hauled crates. Climbed stairs to check on her father, who'd managed to spill water all over himself and needed fresh bedding. "Where'd you run off to?" he asked between coughing fits, watching her with those sharp blue eyes that age and illness hadn't dulled. Had something to take care of. Heard Caleb Hayes is back in town. Of course he'd heard. In Pine Hollow, news traveled faster than plague. He is. You talked to him? Evelyn tucked the fresh blanket around her father's thin frame. I did. And? And it's complicated. Her father made a sound that might have been a laugh if he'd had the breath for it. Love usually is. This isn't about love, Papa. This is about being lied to for 9 years. By Caleb? By Victor. That got his attention. His eyes sharpened, cutting through the fog of illness. Victor Hale? What'd he do? She told him. Not everything. Her father didn't have the strength for long conversations anymore. But enough. The letter. The lies. The calculated manipulation that had destroyed 2 lives. By the time she finished, her father's face had gone hard in a way she rarely saw anymore. That boy always had a jealous streak, tried to hide it behind all that proper behavior, but it was there, festering. You never said anything. Wasn't my place. You 3 were friends. Figured you'd work it out amongst yourselves. He coughed again, harsh and wet. Guess I was wrong about that. Evelyn helped him drink, holding the cup steady while his shaking hands tried to manage. What should I do? What do you want to do? I want to hurt him, Victor. I want him to feel even a fraction of what I've felt for 9 years. That's anger talking. Her father settled back against the pillows. And anger's got its place. But what comes after? After you've hurt him and made him suffer and gotten your revenge? Then what? She didn't have an answer for that. Talk to Caleb, her father said quietly. Real talk, hard talk. Figure out if there's anything worth saving between you 2. Then deal with Victor. And if there's nothing to save, then at least you'll know for certain. But Evie, he caught her hand with surprising strength. Don't let Victor steal any more of your life than he already has. Don't give him that power. She found Caleb the next morning at Clara's boarding house. He was in the common room, drinking coffee that looked strong enough to strip paint, staring at nothing. Walk with me, Evelyn said from the doorway. He stood without question. Followed her out into the early morning streets where Pine Hollow was just beginning to wake. The bakery pumping out smoke and the smell of bread. The saloon still dark and quiet after a long night. The church bell silent until Sunday came around again. They walked past all of it, heading toward the creek that ran along Pine Hollow's northern edge. The water ran high this time of year, swollen with mountain snowmelt, rushing over rocks that had been worn smooth by decades of current. Evelyn sat on the fallen log where she used to come as a girl, where she and Caleb had come together back when the future seemed full of possibility instead of pain. Tell me everything, she said, from the moment you left. Don't skip anything. Don't make it prettier than it was. Just tell me the truth. So he did. He told her about riding out of Pine Hollow at dawn, letter in his pocket, convinced he was doing the noble thing, told her about the first town he'd stopped in, 3 Rivers, 2 days south, where he'd drunk himself sick trying to drown the guilt, told her about the years that followed, the jobs he'd taken breaking horses for ranches across the territory, the supply trains he'd guided through dangerous country where bandits and weather could kill you equally fast, the fights he'd gotten into, the scars he'd collected, the nights he'd spent staring at stars and wondering if leaving had been the biggest mistake of his life. I tried to move on, he admitted, voice rough. Tried to convince myself it was for the best. Even courted a woman in Silver Creek for about 6 months, Sarah. She was kind, patient, deserved better than a man who couldn't stop thinking about someone else. That hurt more than Evelyn expected. The idea of Caleb with another woman, building a life that didn't include her. What happened? I ended it. Wasn't fair to her. Wasn't fair to me. He picked up a smooth stone, turning it over in his scarred hands. That's when I started drinking heavier. Not just to forget, but to punish myself for being too weak to let you go and too much of a coward to come back. Why didn't you? The question burned. If you were miserable, if you knew leaving was a mistake, why didn't you just come home? Because I believe Victor's letter was the truth. Caleb met her eyes. Believed that coming back would only hurt you more. That I'd be forcing myself into a life you'd moved on from. The guilt of leaving was terrible, but the idea of making things worse for you by returning? That was unbearable. The twisted logic of it made a horrible kind of sense. Caleb had convinced himself that staying away was an act of love, that suffering alone was somehow noble, that her happiness, even imagined, even false, mattered more than his own. Victor had known exactly which strings to pull. 4 years ago, Caleb continued, I hit bottom, was working a ranch outside Copper Bend, got thrown by a stallion that damn near killed me. Broke 3 ribs, fractured my collarbone, spent 2 weeks barely able to move. Lying there in that bunkhouse, hurting so bad I could barely breathe. All I could think about was you. Whether you were happy, whether you'd found someone who deserved you, whether you ever thought about me, I thought about you every day. The admission slipped out before Evelyn could stop it. Every single day for 9 years. Something broke in Caleb's expression. His hands clenched around the stone until his knuckles went white. I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, doesn't give back the years we lost. But I need you to know. I'm sorry for believing the lie. Sorry for not fighting harder. Sorry for letting fear make me weak. Evelyn stared at the rushing water, watched it carry away leaves and twigs and bits of broken things that would never be whole again. I'm sorry too, she said quietly, for assuming the worst of you, for never considering that maybe there was more to the story, for hating you when you were just as much a victim as I was. They sat in silence while the creek rushed on and Pine Hollow woke around them. Somewhere in town, Victor Hale was probably opening his grain house for business, probably going through his day like he hadn't destroyed 2 lives with 1 calculated letter. The rage Evelyn felt toward him was different from what she'd felt toward Caleb, colder, sharper, more patient. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said finally. I need you to understand that. 9 years doesn't just disappear because we both got played. I know, but I'm willing to try, to see if there's anything left between us worth salvaging. Caleb's breath caught. What does that look like? I don't know. She turned to face him fully. Start slow. Start honest. You want to prove you've changed? That you're not going to run the next time things get hard? Then prove it. Stay. Work. Show up every day even when it's uncomfortable, even when I'm angry, even when dealing with the past hurts like hell. I can do that. Can you? She challenged. Because talk is easy, Caleb. Promises are cheap. I need to see it, day after day after day. Not just words. Action. I'll stay as long as you'll let me. Even if I'm difficult? Even if I lash out sometimes because I'm still hurt and angry? Especially then. He said it with quiet conviction. I don't expect this to be easy, Evelyn. Don't expect you to just forget what happened. But if you're willing to give me a chance to prove I'm not the man who left, I'll take it. She studied him in the morning light, saw the scars, saw the years written in new lines around his eyes, saw the weight of regret and guilt and hope all tangled together in his expression. This wasn't the boy she'd fallen in love with at 18. That boy was gone, reshaped by 9 years of hard living and harder lessons. But maybe the man he'd become was someone worth knowing. The store needs work, she said abruptly. Roofs leaking, fences are falling apart, storage sheds practically collapse. Papa can't manage it anymore, and I can't do everything alone. Caleb's lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. You offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to prove yourself useful. She stood, brushing creekside dirt from her skirt. Show up tomorrow morning, early. Bring tools if you have them. We'll start with the fence. I'll be there. And Caleb? She paused, looking back at him. This doesn't mean we're fixed. Doesn't mean I trust you. It just means I'm willing to see if trust is something we can rebuild. That's more than I deserve. Yeah, she agreed. It is. She left him by the creek and headed back to town. Back to the trading post. Back to her father who needed medicine and the customers who needed serving and the life that kept demanding her attention whether she was ready or not. But something had shifted, some small crack in the wall she'd built so carefully. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was possibility. And after 9 years of certainty that she'd been abandoned by choice, possibility felt almost revolutionary. Escape. Caleb showed up the next morning before dawn, carrying a toolbox that looked older than both of them combined. Evelyn was already awake. She'd barely slept, mind racing through everything that could go wrong with this arrangement, when she heard him moving around outside. She watched from the upstairs window as he surveyed the fence line in the growing light. Saw him test posts, check for rot, make mental notes about what needed replacing versus what could be salvaged. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent years doing physical labor. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just competence earned through experience. By the time Evelyn came downstairs and unlocked the front door, Caleb had already started pulling out rotten fence posts. "Thought I said early," she called out. "Not ungodly early." He straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Figured I'd get a head start. This fence is worse than I thought. Gonna need at least 40 new posts, maybe more. Can't afford 40 new posts." "I can." He said it casually, like it wasn't a big deal. "Got some money saved? Consider it rent for the chance you're giving me." Pride wanted Evelyn to refuse, to insist she could handle her own problems. But pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. The fence needed fixing and she needed help, and sometimes accepting both those truths was harder than the actual work. "Fine," she said, "but we keep track. This is a loan, not charity." "Whatever you need it to be." They worked through the morning, Caleb doing the heavy lifting while Evelyn handled customers inside. By midday, he'd replaced a dozen posts and restrung wire that had been sagging for months. People noticed, of course. In Pine Hollow, everything got noticed. Sarah Chen stopped by with questions about lamp oil and comments about how nice it was to see the fence finally getting fixed. Tom Brennan, the doctor's son, made a show of examining Caleb's work and pronouncing it adequate. Even Martha Blackwell managed to insert herself, asking pointed questions about how long Caleb planned to stay this time. Each interaction was a test, a chance for Caleb to get defensive or shut down or prove he was exactly the man who'd run before. He stayed patient, polite, answered questions without getting his back up, took criticism without making excuses. By the time the sun started dropping toward the western mountains, painting Pine Hollow in shades of orange and gold, Evelyn had to admit he'd done good work. The fence looked better than it had in years. Solid, secure, built to last. "Tomorrow," Caleb said, packing up his tools, "I'll start on that roof if you want. Saw some shingles that need replacing before the next rain." "You don't have to." "I know." He shouldered his toolbox. "But I want to. Need to, actually. Sitting around that boarding house room thinking about everything I screwed up isn't doing me any favors. Rather be useful." Something in the way he said it, honest and a little bit raw, made Evelyn's carefully maintained distance waver. "Papa wants to meet you," she said abruptly. "Properly, I mean. Not just as the man who abandoned his daughter, as the man trying to make things right." Caleb went very still. "Does he want to shoot me? Because I'd understand if he wanted to shoot me. He's too weak to lift a rifle, but he might lecture you until you wish he'd shot you instead. I can handle that. Tomorrow night then, after work. Come around back. I'll make dinner." It wasn't much. Just a meal. Just conversation. But it felt like something bigger, like a door opening instead of slamming shut. Caleb recognized it too. She could see it in the way his shoulders loosened slightly, the way he almost smiled. "I'll be there." After he left, Evelyn stood in the gathering dusk and looked at the new fence, at the tangible proof that Caleb Hayes could still show up and do the work and follow through on his word. One day didn't prove anything. One fence didn't rebuild 9 years of trust. But it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The dinner nearly didn't happen. Evelyn's father took a bad turn that afternoon, coughing fits so severe they left him gasping and pale, blood speckling the handkerchief he pressed to his mouth. Doc Brennan came and went with his usual grim expression and quieter warnings about any day now. By the time evening rolled around, Evelyn had convinced herself to cancel. Send word to Caleb that tonight wasn't good, that her father needed rest, that maybe next week would be better. But her father had other ideas. "He's coming tonight?" the old man asked between labored breaths, propped up against pillows Evelyn had arranged for the third time that hour. "He was. But you need to rest, Papa. We can do this another time." "No." Her father's hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping her wrist. "Tonight. I want to see him tonight." "You can barely sit up," which is exactly why it needs to be tonight. His eyes held that terrible clarity dying people sometimes got. "Don't have the luxury of next week, Evie. We both know that." The truth of it settled like stones in her stomach. She wanted to argue, wanted to pretend they had more time. But lies didn't serve anyone at this point. All right, she agreed quietly. Tonight. Caleb arrived exactly when he'd said he would, carrying a bottle of whiskey that looked expensive and flowers that definitely were out of season in Pine Hollow. For your father, he said, handing over the whiskey. And these, well, I wasn't sure if flowers were appropriate, but the woman at the general store said, they're fine. Evelyn took them before he could spiral into more awkward explanation. Wild roses, probably brought in from 3 towns over. Beautiful and completely impractical and somehow exactly right. She led him upstairs where her father waited, propped up and struggling to look stronger than he was. The 2 men studied each other in the lamplight while Evelyn arranged the roses in a chipped vase. Mr. Mercer, Caleb said finally, thank you for seeing me. Wasn't sure I would. Her father's voice rattled. Thought about having Evie send you away. Thought about a lot of things, actually, none of them charitable. I understand. Do you? The old man's gaze sharpened. You understand what it's like watching your daughter cry herself sick? Watching her build walls so high nobody could reach her? Watching her survive when she should have been living? Caleb's jaw clenched, but he didn't look away. No, sir, I can't understand that. But I can tell you I spent 9 years punishing myself for leaving, and it still doesn't come close to what I put her through. Damn right it doesn't. The silence stretched taut. Evelyn started to intervene. This was too much. Her father was too weak for confrontation. But Caleb spoke first. I should have come back sooner, should have questioned the letter, should have trusted what we had more than I trusted my own fear. He said it simply, honestly. I failed her in every way that mattered, and I know fixing fence posts and patching roofs doesn't make up for that. Doesn't even come close. But it's what I can do right now. Show up. Work. Prove I'm not the man who ran anymore. Her father absorbed this, breathing carefully. Victor Hale wrote that letter. Yes, sir. Always knew that boy had poison in him. Just didn't realize how deep it went. Another labored breath. What are you planning to do about him? That's Evelyn's call to make, not mine. Wrong answer. Her father's voice hardened despite its weakness. He destroyed both your lives. You get a say in how that gets settled. Caleb glanced at Evelyn, who'd gone still by the window. I want him to admit what he did, publicly. Want everyone in Pine Hollow to know he's a liar and a manipulator who cost us 9 years because he was too jealous to let either of us be happy. And then I want to leave him alone. Because the worst thing we could do to Victor is let him live with what he's done while we rebuild what he tried to destroy. Something shifted in her father's expression. Not quite approval, but close to it. You've gotten smarter in 9 years. I've gotten older. Not sure it's the same thing. Despite everything, the old man almost smiled. Fair enough. He gestured weakly toward the door. Go help Evie with dinner. Give me a minute to rest before we eat. Downstairs, Evelyn moved through the kitchen with mechanical precision. Chicken she'd been roasting, potatoes, carrots from the root cellar, simple food that didn't require much attention, which was good because her mind was miles away. He likes you, she said without looking at Caleb. He tolerated me. There's a difference. For Papa, that's practically a declaration of love. She pulled the chicken from the oven, grateful for something to do with her hands. He threatened to shoot the last man who showed interest in me. Who was that? Martin Wheeler. Ran the livery before he moved to Denver. She started carving, focusing on the blade instead of Caleb's presence in her kitchen. Nice enough man. Boring as dirt, but nice. Papa told him if he came around again, he'd load the rifle. What did you tell him? That I didn't need my father fighting my battles. The knife slipped, nearly catching her thumb. Told Martin myself I wasn't interested. Caleb moved closer, not quite touching, but present. Can I help? You can set the table. Plates are in that cabinet. They worked in careful synchronization, not speaking, but aware of each other in the small space. Every time Caleb reached past her for something, Evelyn felt the nearness of him like static before a storm. This was dangerous territory, this quiet domesticity, this almost comfortable silence that felt too much like the life they might have had if Victor hadn't poisoned everything. I keep thinking about him, Evelyn said abruptly. Victor. About confronting him. Making him answer for what he did. What's stopping you? Part of me wants to plan it perfectly. Make sure he can't talk his way out of it or turn things around on us. She arranged food on plates with more care than necessary. Part of me wants to just march over there tomorrow and burn his entire operation to the ground. Both are valid. Are they? She finally looked at him. Because one feels like justice, and the other feels like revenge. And I'm not sure I know the difference anymore. Caleb leaned against the counter, considering. Justice is about making things right. Revenge is about making someone hurt. Sometimes they overlap. Sometimes they're completely different. Which one do you want? Honestly? He met her eyes. I want him to feel what I felt. Every lonely night, every moment of guilt, every time I wondered if leaving you was the worst mistake I'd ever make. I want him to carry that weight until it crushes him. The rawness of it surprised her. This wasn't noble forgiveness or turning the other cheek. This was honest anger from a man who'd been broken by lies. But, Caleb continued, I also know that giving him that much power over how I feel, that's just letting him win again. So maybe the answer is something in between. Which is, make sure everyone knows what he did. Take away his reputation, his standing in this town. Let him live with the consequences while we focus on rebuilding instead of destroying. It made a terrible kind of sense. Victor had always cared desperately about how Pine Hollow saw him. The respected businessman, the helpful friend, the pillar of the community. Strip that away, and you'd strip away everything he valued. I need to think about it, Evelyn said finally. Need to figure out what I actually want beyond just wanting him to suffer. They carried plates upstairs where her father waited, looking smaller against the pillows than he had an hour ago. The meal was quiet, punctuated by her father's careful breathing and the clink of silverware against plates. But it was also oddly peaceful. 3 people sharing food and space without performing for each other, without pretending things were better or worse than they actually were. Halfway through, her father fixed Caleb with a sharp look. You planning to stay in Pine Hollow permanent? Or is this just a stopover before you run off again? Papa, Evelyn started, but Caleb held up a hand. It's a fair question. He set down his fork. I don't have plans to leave, don't have anywhere else I need to be. But I also know earning back trust takes time. And if Evelyn decides she'd rather I move on after all, I'll respect that. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I've got. Caleb's voice stayed steady. I can't make promises about forever when I already broke the most important promise I ever made. All I can do is show up every day and hope that eventually showing up is enough. The old man studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. At least you're not lying about it. He pushed food around his plate. Your father would have hated how you turned out. Evelyn's breath caught. Caleb's father had died when he was 17, thrown from a horse and killed instantly. It had devastated young Caleb, sent him spiraling for months before he'd finally clawed his way back to something resembling normal. But Caleb didn't flinch. My father would have told me I was an idiot for believing that letter without verification, would have said I dishonored what he taught me about thinking for myself. His voice roughened slightly. And he'd have been right. He also would have been proud you came back. Her father coughed, the sound wet and painful. Most men don't have the spine to face their mistakes. They just keep running until they die or the past stops chasing them. I got tired of running. Good. The old man slumped back against the pillows, suddenly exhausted. Because my daughter deserves a man who stays, who fights, who doesn't cut and run the second things get difficult. I know. Do you? Her father's eyes bored into him. Because life with Evie won't be easy. She's stubborn, proud, got a temper like summer lightning. She'll push you away when she's scared and dare you to prove you won't leave. You ready for that? Caleb glanced at Evelyn, who'd gone very still. Yes, sir. I'm ready. Then you're either braver or stupider than I gave you credit for. Her father's breathing grew more labored. Evie, I need to rest now. She helped him settle, adjusting pillows and pulling blankets up despite the warmth of the evening. His hand caught hers before she could step away. He's different, her father whispered. Older, harder, but different in the ways that matter. I know. Don't let pride make you as stupid as he was 9 years ago. Papa, promise me. His grip tightened with surprising desperation. Promise me you won't throw away a second chance just because the first chance went to hell. Evelyn's throat closed around words she couldn't quite form. Finally, she managed, I promise I'll try. It seemed to satisfy him. His hand relaxed and his breathing evened out into something that might have been sleep or might have been unconsciousness. The line between the two had gotten blurry lately. Downstairs, Caleb helped clean up without being asked. They washed dishes in silence, moving around each other in the small kitchen like they'd done this 1,000 times before, instead of just once. "Your father's dying," Caleb said quietly. "I know." "How long?" "Doc says days. Maybe a week if we're lucky." She scrubbed at a plate that was already clean. "He's been holding on longer than anyone expected. Think he's waiting for something." "For what?" "For me to not be alone anymore." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. "He's terrified of leaving me with nobody. That's why he keeps pushing about you, about us. He wants to know I'll have someone before he goes." Caleb absorbed this, drying dishes with methodical care. "That's a lot of pressure to put on you." "He's dying. He gets to be selfish about it." "Still doesn't make it fair." "Fair doesn't enter into it." Evelyn finally set down the plate, gripping the edge of the sink instead. "Nothing about this is fair. Not him dying before he should. Not the 9 years we lost. Not Victor's lies or the mess we're left with. Fair is a luxury we can't afford." She felt Caleb move closer, felt the warmth of him at her back without actually touching. "What can I do?" "Just—" She stopped, surprised by how much she wanted to lean back into him, to let someone else carry some of the weight for once. "Just keep showing up. Keep proving you're not going anywhere. That's all I can handle right now." "I can do that." They finished the dishes. Caleb left with promises to return in the morning to work on the roof. Evelyn locked up the trading post and climbed the stairs to check on her father one more time before bed. He was still sleeping or unconscious or somewhere in between. His breathing rattled like rocks in a can. She sat in the chair beside his bed and let herself cry quietly in the darkness. For everything lost, for everything broken, for the impossible weight of trying to rebuild while simultaneously preparing to grieve. Tomorrow she'd be strong again. Tomorrow she'd serve customers and manage inventory and pretend she had everything under control. But tonight, alone in the dark with her dying father, Evelyn Mercer let herself be exactly what she was, exhausted, terrified, and so very tired of surviving alone. The roof repair took 3 days. Caleb worked methodically, replacing rotten shingles and reinforcing weak spots while Evelyn managed the store below. People noticed, of course. In Pine Hollow, everything got noticed and commented on and dissected until there was nothing left to analyze. Sarah Chen stopped by daily with questions about merchandise and observations about how good the roof was looking. Tom Brennan made a point of inspecting Caleb's work and pronouncing it acceptable. Even the preacher, a thin, serious man named Reverend Matthews, who ran the church with the enthusiasm of someone fulfilling an unpleasant obligation, managed to corner Evelyn after Sunday service. "I've heard Caleb Hayes is back," he said with that particular brand of concern religious men used when they wanted to meddle. "He is." "And you've forgiven him for abandoning you?" "I haven't decided what I've done yet." Evelyn kept her voice level, still working that out. "The scripture teaches us about forgiveness. The scripture also teaches a lot of things people in this town conveniently ignore when it suits them." She met his gaze steadily. "If you're worried about my spiritual well-being, Reverend, you can rest easy. I'm managing just fine." He'd backed off after that, but the encounter left her raw. Everyone had opinions about what she should do, how she should feel, whether she should take Caleb back or send him packing. Nobody asked what she actually wanted. By Wednesday, Victor still hadn't made an appearance. His grain house sat on the south side of town, doing steady business while its owner pretended the past didn't exist. Evelyn watched people come and go, wondered if any of them knew what Victor had done, if they'd care even if they did. That afternoon, while Caleb hammered new shingles overhead, Victor finally walked into the trading post. Evelyn's entire body went rigid. He looked older, softer around the middle, harder around the eyes. His hair had started graying at the temples in a way that might have looked distinguished if she didn't know what poison lived behind his respectable appearance. "Evelyn." He said her name like nothing had changed, like he hadn't destroyed her life. "Heard Caleb was back in town. Wanted to check on you." "Check on me?" She repeated it flatly. "Why would you need to do that?" "Because I care about you. Always have." He leaned against the counter with false casualness. I know his return must be difficult, bringing up old pain. If you need someone to talk to, get out. Victor blinked. What? I said get out. Evelyn's voice stayed level, but something dangerous crept into it. Get out of my store, get away from me, and don't come back. Evelyn, I understand you're upset, but you understand nothing. The words came faster now, years of suppressed rage finally finding their target. You manipulative, lying piece of... The hammer strikes from above stopped abruptly. Evelyn heard Caleb moving on the roof, probably debating whether to climb down and intervene. Victor's expression shifted, false concern giving way to something colder. I see he's been filling your head with stories. Stories? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you're calling it? Stories? Whatever he told you about that letter, don't. Evelyn moved around the counter, getting close enough to see Victor's pupils contract. Don't you dare try to spin this. I've seen the letter. I know what you did. The only question is whether you're going to admit it or force me to drag the truth out of you publicly. For a long moment, Victor said nothing. Then his shoulders sagged in a way that might have looked like defeat, but felt more like calculation. I did what I thought was right, he said quietly. What I thought was best for everyone. Best for everyone or best for you? Can it be both? He met her eyes. You were drowning here, Evelyn, running this store, taking care of your father, trying to maintain a relationship with someone who was never going to stay. I freed you from that. The audacity of it stole her breath. You freed me? Caleb would have left eventually anyway. You know that. He was always chasing the next job, the next adventure. Better to end it clean than let it drag out until you both resented each other. That wasn't your choice to make. Someone had to make it. Victor's voice hardened. Someone had to protect you from your own poor judgment. Above them, the roof creaked as Caleb moved to the ladder. Evelyn held up a hand, stopping him without looking away from Victor. You destroyed 9 years of our lives because you thought you knew better than we did what we needed. She said it slowly, letting each word land. You lied. You manipulated. You played us against each other, and then watched us suffer. And now you're standing here trying to justify it as some kind of favor? I loved you. Victor's mask finally cracked. I loved you, and you never even saw me. It was always Caleb, always him, no matter what I did or how much I proved myself as a friend. There it was, the truth beneath all the justifications. So you made sure neither of us could have what we wanted, Evelyn finished. If you couldn't have me, nobody could, especially not him. That's not... Victor stopped, seemed to realize denial was pointless. It wasn't supposed to go on this long. I thought after a few months you'd move on, find someone else, be happy. With you. Maybe. He had the grace to look ashamed. Or just happy. Without him. Evelyn heard Caleb's boots hit the ground outside. Heard him come through the back door into the storage area. Heard him stop just out of sight, listening. I'm going to tell everyone what you did, she said calmly. I'm going to make sure every person in Pine Hollow knows you're a liar who destroyed 2 lives because you were too jealous and controlling to let anyone be happy. Evelyn, and then I'm going to forget you exist, because you're not worth my anger anymore, Victor. You're not worth my time or my energy or 1 more second of my life. She stepped back. The worst punishment I can give you is watching Caleb and me rebuild what you tried to destroy while you sit alone with what you've done. Victor's face went through several expressions. Shock, anger, something that might have been grief. You don't mean that. Every word. I could fight this. Could tell people he's lying. That he came back after 9 years with some forged letter trying to turn you against your oldest friend. You could try. Caleb's voice came from the doorway, steady and hard. But we both know that letter's real. We both know any handwriting expert would confirm it's yours. And we both know that once people start looking closely at your story, it's going to fall apart. Victor turned, and for the first time, Evelyn saw actual fear in his eyes. Caleb, don't. Caleb moved into the room, positioning himself beside Evelyn, but not in front of her. You don't get to use my name like we're still friends. Like you didn't spend 9 years watching me torture myself with guilt while you played the concerned friend to Evelyn. I was protecting her. You were protecting yourself. Caleb's jaw tightened. From being left behind. From being second choice. From having to face that sometimes people love each other and there's nothing you can do about it except step aside with grace. The silence stretched taut as wire. Victor looked between them, seemed to measure his options, and apparently found them all wanting. Fine. He straightened his coat with shaking hands. Tell whoever you want. See if I care. This town knows me. They know my family has been here for 3 generations. They're not going to believe some drifter who abandoned you and came crawling back with convenient stories. Maybe not, Evelyn agreed. But doubt is a powerful thing, Victor. Even if half the town doesn't believe us, that's half the town looking at you differently, wondering, questioning, and you care so much about what people think of you. Always have. She watched the truth of that land, watched Victor realize that she understood him better than he'd ever realized. That his need for approval and respect was the lever she'd used to break him. You should go, she said quietly, before I change my mind about handling this quietly. Victor left without another word. The bell above the door chimed his departure. Evelyn stood very still, processing what had just happened. The confrontation she'd imagined 1,000 times had finally occurred, and it felt simultaneously exactly right and completely hollow. You okay? Caleb asked. I don't know. She moved to the window, watched Victor's retreating back as he headed toward his grain house. I thought I'd feel better, vindicated maybe, or satisfied, but I just feel empty. That's normal. Caleb joined her at the window. Confronting someone who hurt you doesn't always feel as good as you imagine it will. He actually thinks he did me a favor. The realization still stung. He destroyed us, and honestly believes it was for my own good. People will justify anything if they try hard enough. They stood in silence, watching Pine Hollow move through its afternoon rhythms. The blacksmith working his forge, the saloon getting ready for evening business, life continuing regardless of personal dramas. We need to decide what we're doing about him, Evelyn said finally. Whether we're really going to make this public or just let it go. What do you want? I want people to know. She surprised herself with the certainty. Not for revenge, but because he should face consequences, and because maybe if everyone knows what he did, nobody else will trust him enough to let him ruin their lives too. Caleb nodded slowly. Then we do it right. Tell your story. Let people draw their own conclusions. Don't force it or demand they believe us. Just put the truth out there and let it work. How? Start with people who matter, your father's friends, the shopkeepers who've known you your whole life. Let them tell others. He glanced at her. Truth spreads faster than lies in the end. Takes longer, but it spreads further. It made sense. More than screaming accusations or dramatic public confrontations, just quiet truth shared person by person until the whole town knew. All right, Evelyn agreed. We start tomorrow. That night, her father took another turn. Worse this time, bad enough that Doc Brennan stayed past midnight and left with instructions to make him comfortable and prepare for the end. Evelyn sent word to Caleb, who arrived within the hour despite the late time. He sat in the corner of her father's room, saying nothing but present in a way that steadied her when everything felt like it was crumbling. Her father drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid and sometimes lost in memories that played out across his fever-bright eyes. Margaret, he whispered at one point, reaching for someone who wasn't there. Evelyn's mother, dead 15 years now from the same coughing sickness that was taking him. I'm here, Papa. Evelyn took his hand. I'm right here. His eyes focused on her, clarity returning briefly. You confronted Victor. How did you? Martha Blackwell came by while you were downstairs. Told me the whole town's buzzing. He coughed wetly. Good. Boy needed to be faced. He tried to justify it. Evelyn's voice caught. Tried to say he did it for my own good. Men always think they know better than women about what women need. Her father's grip tightened. But you showed him different, didn't you? I tried. Tried isn't good enough. His breathing grew more labored. You finish this, Evie. Make sure everyone knows what he did. Then you let it go and live your damn life. Papa, promise me. The same desperate edge from before. Promise me you won't let his poison keep spreading. Cut it out clean and then move forward. She promised, because what else could she do? Her father was dying and he needed to believe she'd be all right, that she wouldn't spend the rest of her life consumed by bitterness. Maybe if she pretended long enough, it would become true. Just after dawn, her father's breathing changed, slowed, became irregular in a way that made Evelyn's chest tighten with anticipatory grief. Doc Brennan had warned her about this. The final stage could last hours or days, but the ending was inevitable now. Caleb stayed. Didn't offer platitudes or empty comfort, just sat in the corner and bore witness while Evelyn held her father's hand and waited for death to finish what illness had started. The old man's eyes opened one last time as weak sunlight filtered through the window. "Caleb," he rasped. Caleb moved to the bedside immediately. "Sir?" "You break her heart again. I'll haunt you from the grave." No strength behind the words, but absolute conviction nonetheless. "Understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good." Her father's gaze shifted to Evelyn. "Be happy, Evie. That's all I ever wanted. Just be happy." Then he closed his eyes, and 3 breaths later, he was gone. The silence after her father's last breath felt absolute, not peaceful. People always talked about death being peaceful, but that was a lie sold to make the living feel better. This was just absence, the space where a person used to be, now filled with nothing. Evelyn sat holding his cooling hand for a long time. She didn't cry. Couldn't, somehow. The tears were there, backed up behind her eyes like water against a dam, but they wouldn't fall. Caleb stood and quietly left the room. She heard him moving downstairs, heard the front door open and close. Going to fetch Doc Brennan, probably. Or the undertaker. Someone official who knew how to handle bodies and paperwork and all the practical necessities that death required. She should have been the one to go. Should have been making arrangements and notifying people and handling everything the way she'd handled everything else for years. But she couldn't make herself let go of her father's hand. Not yet. When Caleb returned with Doc Brennan and Thomas Kirk, the undertaker, Evelyn finally released her grip, stood, smoothed her father's hair back one last time. "I'll give you the room," she said, voice steady despite everything. Downstairs, the trading post felt too bright, too normal. Sunlight streaming through windows, dust motes floating peacefully. The world continuing like nothing had changed when everything had. Evelyn walked to the counter and started organizing. Straightened already straight inventory, reorganized supplies that didn't need reorganizing. Kept her hands busy because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and she couldn't afford to feel right now. Caleb found her 20 minutes later, methodically counting nails that had already been counted twice. "Evelyn, did they take him?" Her voice came out flat, professional. "They're preparing to. Kirk wants to know about arrangements, service, burial, whether you want the church involved." "No church." The words came automatically. Papa barely tolerated Reverend Matthews when he was alive. Won't insult him by dragging religion into his death. "Where then?" "The cemetery on the hill, next to Mama." She set down the nails, picked up a ledger she'd already balanced. Simple service, nothing fancy. He'd have hated anything elaborate. Caleb moved closer, not touching but present. "What do you need?" "I need..." She stopped, surprised by what she was about to say. "I need to not think about this for a few hours. Need to pretend everything's normal until I can actually process what just happened." "All right, so I'm opening the store today. Business as usual." "Evelyn, I know what you're going to say." She finally looked at him. "That I should take time, that I should grieve properly, that keeping busy is just avoiding the pain." Her voice cracked slightly. "But I've been preparing for this for months, years maybe. And if I stop moving right now, I'm going to collapse. And I can't afford to collapse because there's inventory to manage and customers to serve and a funeral to plan." Caleb studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Tell me what you need me to do." The unexpected acceptance nearly broke her composure. She'd expected argument, expected him to push back or insist she rest or try to manage her grief for her the way everyone always tried to manage everything. Instead, he was just asking what she needed. "Help with the heavy lifting," she said finally. "There's a delivery coming this afternoon. Flour and sugar, some tools, and the storage shed still needs cleaning out." "Consider it done." They worked through the morning in careful silence. Customers came and went, most already knowing about her father's death because news traveled that fast in Pine Hollow. Some offered condolences. Others just completed their transactions quietly, recognizing that Evelyn didn't want sympathy right now. Martha Blackwell arrived around noon with food nobody had asked for. "Made extra stew," she announced, setting down a covered pot. "Figured you wouldn't feel like cooking." "Thank you, Martha." "And I wanted to say—" Martha hesitated, unusual for someone who normally plowed through conversations without pause. "I know I gossiped too much. Know I said things over the years about you and Caleb that weren't kind, but your father was a good man. Best kind of man, and I'm sorry he's gone." It was possibly the most genuine thing Martha Blackwell had said in years. "I appreciate that," Evelyn managed. After Martha left, Sarah Chen stopped by, then Tom Brennan, then half a dozen other townspeople, all bringing food or offering help or just paying respects. By mid-afternoon, the trading post counter was covered with casseroles and pies and bread. "Your father was well loved," Caleb observed, helping move dishes to the back room. "He was fair," Evelyn corrected quietly. "Charged honest prices, extended credit when people needed it, didn't judge folks for their struggles. In a town like this, that counts for a lot. Counts for everything, really." They were stacking the last of the dishes when Victor walked in. Evelyn's entire body tensed. Of all the days, all the possible times, he chose now to make an appearance. "I heard about your father," Victor said from the doorway. No pretense this time, no false concern, just careful neutrality. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Are you?" It wasn't a question. "I am." He moved further into the store, keeping distance between them. "Whatever's between us, I respected him. He was a good man." "He was." Evelyn's hands clenched at her sides. "Which is why I'm not going to make a scene in his memory. But you need to leave." "I brought something." Victor pulled out an envelope. "Money for the funeral costs. I know running this place while he was sick couldn't have been easy financially. I don't want your money. It's not charity. It's—" Victor struggled for words. "It's what neighbors do, what friends do." "We're not friends." Caleb stepped out from the back room, expression hard. "Haven't been friends since you destroyed 9 years of our lives." Victor's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to do the right thing here." 9 years too late for that," Evelyn said flatly. "Take your money and your guilt and get out of my store." "Evelyn, she told you to leave." Caleb moved between them, not aggressive, but immovable. "You should listen." For a moment it looked like Victor might push back, might argue or defend himself or try once more to justify what he'd done. But something in Caleb's stance, or maybe in Evelyn's expression, made him reconsider. "Fine." He pocketed the envelope. "But for what it's worth, I am sorry. About your father. About everything." He left before either of them could respond. Evelyn let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The audacity, coming here today, trying to buy forgiveness with funeral money. "He's scared." Caleb's voice held no sympathy. "Knows we're going to expose him, trying to rebuild his image before it gets destroyed. Too late for that." They finished organizing the food in silence. Outside, Pine Hollow moved through its afternoon rhythms. The sun tracked across the sky. Time continued its relentless forward march despite personal tragedy. That evening, after closing the store, Evelyn finally climbed the stairs to her father's room. Someone, probably Doc Brennan, had stripped the bed and opened the windows. The space looked sterile now, empty of the life that had filled it. She sat in the chair where she'd kept vigil and let herself cry. Not the gentle, cleansing tears people wrote about in books. Ugly crying. The kind that made her chest hurt and her throat raw and her eyes burn. 9 years of suppressed pain finally finding release through the crack her father's death had created in her armor. She cried for her father, for the years he'd spent dying slowly, for the life he'd wanted that Pine Hollow had never let him have. She cried for herself, for the girl she'd been at 22 who'd believed in futures and promises, for the woman she'd become who'd learned to survive but forgotten how to live. And she cried for Caleb, for the 9 years he'd spent punishing himself for a crime he hadn't committed, for the guilt that had hollowed him out and the loneliness that had marked him. She cried until there was nothing left, until she was wrung out and exhausted and empty. Then she washed her face, changed her clothes, and went downstairs to start making funeral arrangements. The service was held 3 days later on a gray morning that threatened rain but never quite delivered. Half of Pine Hollow showed up, cramming into the small cemetery on the hill where Evelyn's mother had been buried 15 years earlier. Reverend Matthews tried to officiate despite Evelyn's explicit request otherwise, but she cut him off before he could get properly started. My father didn't want religious platitudes, she said clearly, voice carrying across the gathered crowd. He wanted honesty, so that's what he's getting. She talked about her father the way he'd actually been, stubborn, practical, fair to a fault, a man who'd loved her mother desperately and never quite recovered from losing her but had tried his best anyway. A man who'd built a business on integrity and raised a daughter to value truth over comfort. He taught me that surviving isn't the same as living, Evelyn said, looking out at the sea of faces. That doing right by people matters more than profit. That sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. Her voice caught slightly. And in his last days, he taught me that holding on to anger poisons you worse than the thing you're angry about. She saw Victor standing at the edge of the crowd. Saw him flinch at that last part. Good. Let him flinch. After the burial, people gathered at the trading post for the customary post-funeral meal. The food that had accumulated over the past 3 days was laid out, and Pine Hollow's residents moved through the space with the careful respect people showed in the presence of fresh grief. Evelyn worked the room automatically, accepting condolences, thanking people for coming, playing the gracious host while inside she felt scraped raw. Caleb stayed nearby without hovering, present when she needed him, invisible when she didn't. It was a balance she appreciated more than she could articulate. Old Henry Morrison cornered her near the window, whiskey on his breath and sincerity in his rheumy eyes. Your father extended me credit 6 winters ago when my crops failed. Didn't have to, could have let me starve, but he carried my debt for 8 months until I could pay. He gripped her hand. That's the kind of man he was, the kind Pine Hollow needs more of. Thank you, Henry, and I'll tell you something else. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. Martha Blackwell's been spreading talk about Caleb Hayes and some letter from Victor Hale. Don't know the details, but I know this. Your father trusted Caleb at the end. That's good enough for me. After he moved on, Sarah Chen approached with similar sentiments. Then Tom Brennan. Then a half dozen others, all mentioning they'd heard things about Victor, about lies, about manipulation. All saying they believed Evelyn's version of events without her having to explain anything. Her father's quiet plan was working. Truth spreading person to person, taking root in the fertile ground of community trust she'd built over years. By late afternoon, when most people had left and only the closest neighbors remained helping clean up, Evelyn felt something shift in Pine Hollow's atmosphere. A collective turning away from Victor. Not dramatic or announced, just a subtle cooling of the town's regard. Martha Blackwell confirmed it while drying dishes. Ran into Clara at the general store this morning. Said Victor came asking about whether she'd heard any talk. She told him straight, said the whole town knows what he did to you and Caleb, and we don't take kindly to liars. What did he say? Nothing. Just turned around and left looking like he'd been gut-punched. Martha set down a plate. Man's realizing he's about to be a pariah in his own town. Evelyn should have felt triumphant. This was exactly what she'd wanted. Victor facing consequences, losing his standing, experiencing even a fraction of the isolation she'd endured. Instead, she just felt tired. After everyone left, Caleb helped finish the cleanup in companionable silence. The trading post slowly returned to normal. Dishes put away and furniture straightened and floors swept. You did good today, Caleb said finally. Your father would have been proud. He would have complained about all the fuss, and then been secretly pleased about it. Despite everything, Evelyn almost smiled. Yeah, he would have been. They stood in the empty store, lamplight casting long shadows across worn floorboards. Outside, night had fallen over Pine Hollow, bringing with it the sounds of a frontier town settling in for evening. Distant piano music from the saloon, dogs barking, the low murmur of voices from people walking home. What happens now? Caleb asked quietly. Now I figure out how to run this place alone. Evelyn looked around the trading post her father had built. Keep it going. Honor his memory by not letting it fail. You won't be alone. He said it simply, matter of fact. I'm still here. For how long? The question came out sharper than intended. How long before you get restless again? Before Pine Hollow feels too small and the next town over looks more interesting? Caleb absorbed the accusation without flinching. That's fear talking. That's experience talking. Fair enough. He moved closer, not touching, but present. But I'm not the same man who left 9 years ago. That man was scared of being tied down. Scared of failing you. Scared of everything, really, except running. His voice roughened. This man is more scared of losing you again than staying could ever make me. Evelyn wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly it physically hurt. But belief required trust, and trust required time. And time felt like something she couldn't afford to waste anymore. My father died believing we'd figure this out, she said quietly. Believing you'd stay and I'd let you, and somehow we'd rebuild what got destroyed. And you don't believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. The honesty cost her. I'm exhausted, Caleb. Exhausted from fighting and grieving and trying to survive in a town that's watched me struggle for years. And the idea of opening myself up to more potential pain. She stopped, throat closing. I'm not sure I'm strong enough. You're the strongest person I know. Strength and survival aren't the same thing. My father taught me that. She finally met his eyes. I've survived, but I want to live. Really live. And I'm terrified that trusting you again is going to destroy what's left of me if it doesn't work out. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of hard-won understanding. I can't promise it'll work out. Can't promise we won't hurt each other, or that rebuilding will be easy, or that there won't be days we both wonder if it's worth it. He paused. But I can promise I'll stay. Even when it's hard. Even when you're angry or scared or pushing me away, I'll stay and keep trying until you either believe me or tell me definitively to go. And if I tell you to go, then I'll respect that. Won't make you carry the weight of my presence if you don't want it. It was the most honest answer he could have given. No false promises, no guarantees, just commitment to show up and try. I need time, Evelyn said finally. Need to bury my father properly, get the store stabilized, figure out what my life looks like now. Can you give me that? Time without pressure or expectations? As much as you need. And you'll stay? Even if it takes months? Even if it takes years? She wanted to test that. Wanted to push him away immediately and see if he'd keep his word. But she was too tired for games, too worn down by grief and anger and the crushing weight of loss. There's a room upstairs, she heard herself say. Papa's room. It'll need cleaning out, but it's livable. You could stay there instead of paying for the boarding house. Caleb's eyes widened slightly. You sure about that? No. The admission felt important. But keeping you close where I can see if you're actually staying seems smarter than wondering from a distance. That's practical. Practical is what I do best. Something that might have been hope flickered across his features, quickly suppressed. I'll move my things tomorrow. After Caleb left, Evelyn climbed the stairs to her father's empty room one more time. The space still smelled faintly of illness, an old man, and the particular mustiness that accumulated in sick rooms despite best efforts. She'd have to clean it thoroughly before Caleb moved in. Strip everything, air it out, make it livable again. The practicality of the task steadied her. This she could do. Clean rooms and organize space and create order from chaos. The emotional work of rebuilding trust could wait. Right now, she had a funeral to finish processing and a store to run and a life to figure out how to live instead of just survive. The rest would come. Or it wouldn't. Either way, she'd manage. She always did. The next week passed in a blur of necessity. Caleb moved into her father's old room, spending 2 full days cleaning it out while Evelyn managed the store below. They worked in parallel orbits, occasionally intersecting for meals or practical conversations, but mostly maintaining careful distance. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't terrible either. Just 2 people learning how to exist in the same space after years of painful separation. The town's attitude toward Victor continued to shift. Subtle at first, people choosing other suppliers when they could. Conversations dying when he approached. Invitations to community events mysteriously not reaching him. Then less subtle. Ben Crawford, who ran the livery, publicly called Victor a liar and a manipulator in the middle of the saloon on a Saturday night. The story spread through Pine Hollow like wildfire, and by Sunday morning half the town knew about it. Victor tried to respond, tried to defend himself or downplay what he'd done or spin the narrative in his favor. Nobody wanted to hear it. Evelyn watched it happen with mixed feelings. Part of her felt vindicated seeing Victor experience consequences. Part of her just felt sad that it had come to this. That 9 years had been stolen because one man couldn't handle his jealousy with any kind of grace. On Thursday afternoon, Victor appeared at the trading post one final time. He looked terrible, thinner, older, worn down by the town's collective judgment in a way that would have been satisfying if it wasn't so pathetic. "I know you don't want to see me," he said from the doorway. Didn't enter, didn't presume even that much. "But I needed to say something." "Then say it and leave." Victor's hands clenched at his sides. "I was wrong. About everything. About the letter. About manipulating you both. About thinking I knew better than you did what you needed." The words came haltingly. "I told myself I was protecting you, that I was being a good friend. But the truth is I was just a jealous coward who couldn't stand watching someone else have what I wanted." Evelyn said nothing, just waited. "I can't give you back the 9 years I stole. Can't undo the damage I caused." He met her eyes finally. "But I want you to know, I'm leaving Pine Hollow, moving east to stay with my cousin in Denver. Figured it was the least I could do. Let you rebuild without having to see my face every day. Running away doesn't fix anything." "I know." His voice cracked slightly. "But staying just makes it worse for everyone. You, Caleb, the whole town. Better if I just go." "That's the first smart thing you've said in 9 years. Victor flinched. "I am sorry, Evelyn. For what it's worth. I'm sorry." "It's not worth much." She kept her voice level. "But I hope wherever you end up, you learn to live with yourself. Because that's the only real punishment you're getting, living with what you did." He nodded slowly, turned to leave, paused at the door. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, not looking back, "Caleb always loved you more than I ever could have. That's what made me angriest, knowing that even if I'd played fair, I still would have lost." Then he was gone. Evelyn stood in the empty store, processing. Victor was leaving. The town had turned against him so completely that exile felt like his only option. She'd won, in a way. Had exposed the truth and watched consequences unfold exactly as she'd hoped. So why did victory feel so hollow? Caleb found her there an hour later, staring at nothing. "Heard Victor's leaving town," he said. "News travels fast." Martha Blackwell saw him loading a wagon, told everyone within earshot. Caleb leaned against the counter. "How do you feel about it?" "I don't know." Evelyn finally moved, started straightening inventory that didn't need straightening. "Satisfied, I guess. And sad. And angry that I feel sad because he doesn't deserve my sympathy." "Feelings don't work on deserving." Caleb's voice was gentle. "You're allowed to feel complicated things about complicated situations." "He destroyed 9 years of our lives." "He did. And now he just gets to leave and start over somewhere else while we're stuck dealing with the aftermath." "Yeah." Caleb didn't argue or try to reframe it, just acknowledge the unfairness. "That's exactly what's happening." The simple agreement steadied her somehow. No silver lining, no trying to make her feel better about it. Just validation that yes, this was terrible and unfair, and she had every right to be angry about it. "I want to be done with him," Evelyn said quietly. "Done thinking about him, done being angry, done letting what he did control how I feel." "That'll take time." "I know." She set down the inventory. "But I'm ready to start trying." Over the next few weeks, Pine Hollow slowly returned to its normal rhythms. Victor's grain house sat empty, eventually taken over by a family from Silver Creek who had no connection to the town's drama. Life moved forward the way it always did, incorporating tragedy and conflict into the ongoing narrative until they became just another chapter in Pine Hollow's long history. Evelyn and Caleb fell into a routine. He helped with the store during the day, heavy lifting, repairs, inventory management. She handled customers and bookkeeping and the 1,000 small decisions running a business required. They ate dinner together most nights, talked about safe topics, avoided the harder conversations about what they were to each other now. It wasn't romance, wasn't even really friendship yet, but it was something, a foundation being laid brick by careful brick. One evening, nearly a month after her father's death, Evelyn found Caleb on the front porch watching the sunset paint Pine Hollow in shades of orange and gold. She sat beside him without asking permission. "I've been thinking," she said after a long silence. About what my father said before he died, about being happy instead of just surviving." Caleb stayed quiet, letting her work through it. "I've spent 9 years building walls," Evelyn continued, "protecting myself from being hurt again. Got so good at it, I forgot what it felt like to be open." She paused. But walls that keep pain out also keep everything else out. Joy, connection, hope. All of it gets blocked by the same barriers. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm tired of hiding behind walls. She turned to look at him. I'm saying I want to try, really try. Not just letting you stay because it's practical or because my father wanted it, but because I want to see if we can actually rebuild something worth having. Caleb's breath caught. Are you sure? No. The honesty felt essential. I'm terrified, actually. Terrified you'll leave. Terrified I'll drive you away. Terrified we'll hurt each other worse than we already have. She held his gaze. But I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I'd been brave enough to try. For a long moment, Caleb said nothing. Then he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was calloused, scarred, warm against hers. We'll take it slow, he said quietly. No rushing, no pretending the past didn't happen. Just forward, one day at a time. I can do that. They sat together on the porch while night fell over Pine Hollow, hands linked, watching the town settle into evening. Somewhere in the distance, the saloon piano started up. Dogs barked. Life continued its eternal forward march. For the first time in 9 years, Evelyn felt something other than just survival. She felt possibility. Possibility, Evelyn discovered, was both exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. The first real test came 3 days after their conversation on the porch. Caleb was in the storage shed organizing supplies when a rider came through town, a rough-looking man on a dusty horse who stopped at the trading post asking for directions to the mining camps up north. You Caleb Hayes? The man squinted at him through the shed doorway. Depends who's asking. Name's Morrison, Jack Morrison. Worked with you on that supply run through Copper Canyon about 5 years back. Caleb straightened, recognition dawning. Morrison? Hell, I thought you'd moved to California. Did? Didn't take. The man dismounted, stretching road-stiff muscles. Been working escort jobs through the territory. Heard you were back in Pine Hollow. Figured I'd stop by. Got a proposition for you. Evelyn, who'd been listening from inside the store, felt her stomach drop. She watched through the window as the two men talked, saw Caleb's posture shift into something familiar. The restless energy of a man discussing work that involved movement, distance, leaving. Morrison gestured animatedly, clearly describing some job opportunity. Caleb listened with an expression she couldn't quite read. When Morrison finally rode off and Caleb came back inside, Evelyn was reorganizing the counter display for the third time. That was Morrison, he said unnecessarily. I gathered. He's putting together a crew to escort mining equipment up to the camps. 3-week run, good pay. Asked if I wanted in. There it was. The moment she'd been dreading. The first real temptation to leave, to return to the life he'd lived for 9 years. And, her voice came out steadier than she felt. And I told him no. Caleb moved to the counter, leaned against it. Told him I'm staying put, that I've got commitments here. Evelyn's hand stilled on the display. You could have taken it. 3 weeks isn't that long. It's not about the time. He met her eyes. It's about what taking it would mean. That I'm still keeping one foot out the door, still ready to run the second something more interesting comes along. Some people would call that being practical, earning money. Some people would, but you'd call it proof I haven't changed. He said it without accusation, just fact. And you'd be right to. The relief that flooded through her was almost painful, but underneath it, guilt gnawed. I don't want to be the reason you turn down work. Don't want you resenting me for trapping you here. You're not trapping me, Caleb's voice was firm. I'm choosing this, choosing to stay, choosing to prove that what we're building matters more than 3 weeks of good pay and familiar work. But what if... She stopped, struggling with the vulnerability of the question. What if you wake up one day and regret choosing me over the life you had? Then I'll deal with that regret. He said it simply. But Evelyn, the life I had was lonely as hell. Profitable sometimes, sure. Adventurous, maybe. But every night I was alone with nothing but guilt and whiskey and the knowledge that I'd walked away from the only thing that ever mattered. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this time was different. But 9 years of abandonment had taught her that words were easy and follow-through was rare. I need you to understand something, she said carefully. every time someone offers you work, every time the opportunity to leave presents itself. I'm going to be scared. I'm going to wonder if this is the time you say yes, and I don't know when or if that fear will go away. I know. And that's not fair to you, living with someone who's constantly waiting for you to leave. Maybe not. Caleb moved around the counter, closing the distance between them but not touching. But fair doesn't really matter here. What matters is that I understand why you're scared, and I'm willing to keep proving I'm staying until you believe it. That could take years. Then it takes years. The certainty in his voice nearly undid her. She'd spent so long protecting herself, building walls, expecting the worst. Having someone patient enough to wait for those defenses to come down felt almost impossible. Morrison will probably come back through, she said quietly. Other men will offer you work. The temptation won't stop just because you said no once. I know that too. So how do I trust that you won't eventually say yes? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. You don't. Not completely. Not right away. Trust isn't something I can demand or you can force. It's something that gets built day by day, choice by choice. He paused. All I can do is keep making the choice to stay. Keep proving through action that I mean what I say. Eventually, maybe that'll be enough. It was the most honest answer he could have given. No false promises, no guarantees, just commitment to the work of rebuilding. All right, Evelyn said finally. But Caleb, if you ever do want to leave, if staying here starts to feel like a cage instead of a choice, tell me. Don't just disappear again. Give me the honesty of a real goodbye. I can promise that. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. But I don't think it'll come to that. The gesture was intimate, but not demanding. A question rather than an assumption. Evelyn found herself leaning into it slightly before catching herself. They were still too fragile for this. Still too new at rebuilding. Physical closeness felt dangerous when emotional trust was still being reconstructed. Caleb seemed to sense it. He dropped his hand and stepped back, giving her space. I should finish the shed, he said. Storm's coming in tonight. Want everything secured. After he left, Evelyn stood alone in the store, processing. The first test had passed. Caleb had chosen to stay when leaving would have been easier. It didn't erase 9 years of abandonment, but it was a start. A crack in her armor. A small seed of trust taking root. The storm Caleb predicted rolled in around midnight, violent and sudden, the way spring storms in the territory often were. Thunder that shook the building's frame, lightning that turned night into brief, brilliant day. Rain hammering the newly repaired roof with enough force to test every shingle Caleb had replaced. Evelyn lay awake listening to it, tracking the sounds. Water in the gutters, wind against the walls, the creak of the building settling under the assault. No leaks. The roof was holding. Around 2 a.m, she heard movement from Caleb's room across the hall. Footsteps. The sound of a window being checked and secured. Then silence. She should have stayed in bed, should have let him handle whatever he was handling without interfering. Instead, she found herself padding across the hall, knocking softly. It's open. Caleb was standing by the window watching the storm rage across Pine Hollow. Lightning illuminated his profile, all sharp edges and old scars. Couldn't sleep? Evelyn asked from the doorway. Never could sleep through storms. He didn't turn around. Spent too many years camped outside where storms meant real danger. Guess old habits stick. She moved into the room, standing beside him at the window. Below, Pine Hollow was dark except for occasional lamplight and the sporadic flash of lightning. The streets had turned to mud. The creek that ran through town was probably already rising. I used to love storms, Evelyn said quietly. When I was a girl, Mama would let me sit by the window and watch. Said they were nature cleaning house. And now they just remind me how fragile everything is, how quickly things can fall apart. They stood in companionable silence, watching water sheet down the glass. The intimacy of it struck Evelyn. 2 people in a dark room in the middle of the night, sharing space without expectation or demand. I'm trying, she said abruptly, to trust you, to believe this is real. But every time I start to, my brain reminds me of every way it could go wrong. That's normal. Caleb's voice was gentle. After what you went through, what we both went through, being cautious makes sense. Does it drive you crazy? My constant doubt? Sometimes. He finally turned to look at her. But I also understand it. Earned it, really. Can't expect you to just forget 9 years because I showed up and said sorry. Some men would. Some men are idiots. Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. Fair point. Another crash of thunder, another flash of lightning. The storm showed no signs of letting up. When I was working those supply runs, Caleb said after a moment, there was this night in the mountains. Worst storm I'd ever seen. Lightning hitting so close I could smell it. Couldn't make camp, couldn't keep moving safely. Just had to sit there with the horses and wait it out. Sounds terrifying. It was. But what I remember most is thinking if I died right then, the only regret I'd have was leaving you. He kept his eyes on the storm. Not the jobs I didn't take, not the places I didn't see. Just you. The life we could have had if I hadn't been such a coward. Evelyn's throat tightened. You can't keep punishing yourself for that choice. Victor manipulated you. You believed a lie. I believed it because part of me wanted to believe it. The admission came hard, because leaving was easier than staying and facing my own inadequacy. The letter just gave me permission to do what fear was already pushing me toward. That doesn't make you a coward, doesn't it? He finally looked at her. I had a choice, Evelyn. Letter or no letter, I could have come back. Could have asked you directly. Could have fought for us instead of accepting the easy out Victor offered. And I could have tried to find you, she heard herself say. Could have demanded answers instead of just assuming you'd abandon me. We both made choices based on fear and pain and incomplete information. So where does that leave us? I don't know. Evelyn moved closer to the window, watching rain turn Pine Hollow's streets into rivers. But I think maybe we stop punishing ourselves for the past and focus on not making the same mistakes going forward. Which means, when I'm scared, I tell you instead of building walls. And when you're restless, you tell me instead of just disappearing. She met his eyes. We choose honesty over protection, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Caleb absorbed this, then nodded slowly. I can do that. Can you? Because right now, saying it is easy. Actually doing it when emotions are high and old patterns are screaming at us to protect ourselves. That's different. You're right. He turned to face her fully. So let's practice. Right now. What are you scared of in this moment? The directness of the question caught her off guard. Evelyn's instinct was to deflect, to make a joke or change the subject. But that was exactly the pattern they needed to break. I'm scared that this, she gestured between them, is just temporary comfort. That we're clinging to each other because we both lost so much. And being alone feels worse than trying to rebuild something that might be broken beyond repair. That's fair. Caleb's voice stayed steady. My turn. I'm scared that no matter what I do, no matter how long I stay or how hard I try, it'll never be enough. That 9 years of damage can't be fixed, and I'm just delaying the inevitable moment when you realize I'm not worth the risk. The honesty of it hung between them, raw and undefended. So we're both terrified, Evelyn said finally. Seems like it. But we're still here. Yeah. Something that might have been hope flickered in his expression. We are. The storm raged on outside, but inside Caleb's small room, something shifted. Not fixed, not healed, but acknowledged. Two broken people admitting they were broken and choosing to try anyway. It wasn't romance. It wasn't even really reconciliation yet. But it was honest. And after 9 years of lies, honesty felt revolutionary. The weeks that followed developed a rhythm. Caleb worked the store during the day, heavy lifting, repairs, helping customers who needed someone to load wagons or move inventory. Evelyn handled the business side, bookkeeping, ordering, managing relationships with suppliers. Evenings they spent planning. The store needed expansion, they decided. Another room for dry goods, better shelving, maybe even a small section for prepared foods that would compete with the general store on the north end of town. We'd need capital, Evelyn said one night, reviewing ledgers by lamplight. More than we have saved? How much more? She did the math quickly. $300? Maybe $400 if we want to do it right. Caleb was quiet for a moment. I have money saved, from the years working. How much? Enough to cover it. Evelyn looked up sharply. Caleb, that's your money. Your security if things don't work out here. Things are working out here. Are they? Because most days it feels like we're just going through motions, being pleasant to each other, avoiding the hard stuff. He set down the piece of harness he'd been repairing. You want hard stuff? Fine. I'll give you hard stuff. He leaned forward, intensity replacing his usual careful calm. I'm in love with you. Have been since we were 18 years old. 9 years didn't change that. Probably 90 years wouldn't either. Evelyn's breath caught. And before you tell me I'm just remembering the girl you used to be, Caleb continued, I'm not. I'm talking about the woman sitting across from me right now, the one who survived losing her father and nearly a decade of loneliness and still managed to keep this business alive through sheer stubbornness. His voice roughened. The one who's tough as nails on the outside but still cries at night when she thinks nobody can hear. The one who's so scared of being hurt again that she keeps me at arm's length, even though I can see in her eyes that she feels something too. Caleb, so yeah, I want to invest my money in this store, in our future, because I'm not planning for things not working out. I'm planning for them to work. He held her gaze. That honest enough for you? Evelyn sat frozen, heart hammering. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from the vulnerability of being seen this clearly. But running was the old pattern, the safe pattern. And safe hadn't made her happy, just careful. I don't know if I love you, she said finally, forcing herself to meet his eyes. I don't know if what I feel is love or just muscle memory from who we used to be, but I know I think about you constantly. Know I sleep better when you're in the house. Know that when Morrison offered you that job, I was terrified you'd say yes. That's a start? Is it enough? For now? Caleb's expression softened. Yeah, it's enough. They sat in the lamplight, the admission hanging between them. Not a resolution, not a declaration, just truth, offered without armor. So the expansion, Evelyn said eventually, needing to ground the conversation back in practical matters. If we use your money, our money, Caleb interrupted gently. If we're doing this, we're partners. Full partners. Financially, operationally, all of it. That's a lot of trust to put in someone who can't even figure out if she loves you. Good thing I'm patient. Despite the heaviness of the conversation, Evelyn found herself almost smiling. You're stubborn is what you are. That too. They worked through the numbers together, planning the expansion with the kind of detail that made it feel real. Not just talk. Actual blueprints for a shared future. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The next morning, Ben Crawford stopped by the store with news that spread through Pine Hollow faster than fire through dry grass. Victor had sent a letter from Denver, not to Evelyn or Caleb, but to Reverend Matthews, asking the preacher to read it aloud at Sunday service. What kind of letter? Evelyn asked, suspicion immediate. Don't know. Ben shifted uncomfortably. Matthews wouldn't say, but word is it's some kind of confession. Public apology, maybe. After Ben left, Caleb found Evelyn in the storage room, furiously reorganizing supplies that didn't need reorganizing. You heard? The whole town's heard by now. She shoved a crate aside harder than necessary. What's he playing at? He already admitted what he did, already left town. What more does he want? Maybe he actually wants to apologize, publicly, the way the damage was public. Or maybe he wants sympathy, wants to paint himself as the tortured soul who made a mistake, and is so very sorry. Evelyn's hands clenched. I don't trust it. Neither do I. Caleb leaned against the doorframe. But ignoring it won't make it go away. If we don't show up Sunday, people will talk. Say we're afraid of what Victor might reveal. I'm not afraid of Victor. I know. But Pine Hollow doesn't. He paused. We show up. We listen to whatever he wrote. We face it together. Then we move on. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to refuse on principle. But Caleb was right. Avoiding it would look like weakness. Fine. We go. She met his eyes. But if he tries to spin this into some noble sacrifice narrative, I'm walking out. Fair enough. Sunday arrived gray and threatening rain. The church filled early, everyone curious about Victor's letter. Evelyn and Caleb sat near the back, close enough to hear, but positioned for easy exit if needed. Reverend Matthews took the pulpit looking uncomfortable. I've received a letter from Victor Hale, currently residing in Denver. He's requested I read it to the congregation. Some of you know the circumstances surrounding his departure. Others may not. Either way, these are his words, not mine. He unfolded the paper and began reading. To the people of Pine Hollow, I write this from Denver, where I've been staying with family and trying to understand the magnitude of what I did. Many of you know by now that I lied to both Caleb Hayes and Evelyn Mercer 9 years ago. I manipulated them apart because I was jealous and scared and convinced myself I was protecting Evelyn when really I was just protecting my own interests. The church was silent except for Matthew's voice. I can't undo the damage. Can't give back the 9 years I stole from them. Can't make the pain I caused disappear. But I want to publicly acknowledge what I did and take full responsibility. No excuses, no justifications. I lied, I manipulated, and I destroyed 2 lives because I was too cowardly to handle my own feelings honestly. Evelyn felt Caleb tense beside her, beside Dids. I don't expect forgiveness. Don't deserve it. But I want everyone in Pine Hollow to know that Caleb Hayes is a better man than I ever was, that Evelyn Mercer deserved better than what I put her through, and that if you're looking for someone to blame for the pain they endured, blame me, entirely and completely. Matthews paused, then continued. I'm staying in Denver, starting over where nobody knows what I've done. It's the coward's way out, I know, but it's the least harmful option I have left. I wish Caleb and Evelyn nothing but happiness. They've earned it. And to Pine Hollow, I'm sorry for betraying the trust you placed in me. I hope someday I can become someone worthy of the second chance you'll never give me. Victor Hale. Matthews folded the letter. The congregation sat in stunned silence. Then Martha Blackwell, of all people, spoke up from the front row. Well, that's something, I suppose. It broke the tension. People started murmuring, processing. Some looked at Evelyn and Caleb with sympathy, others with curiosity, a few with the kind of judgmental assessment that always came when private pain became public knowledge. Evelyn stood abruptly. Caleb followed as she walked out into the gray morning, putting distance between herself and the church. You all right? He asked when they'd reached the creek. I don't know. She stared at the rushing water. Part of me wanted him to grovel, to suffer publicly the way we suffered privately, and he did, sort of. But it doesn't feel like victory. Just feels sad. He can't undo what he did. I know. She turned to face Caleb, but hearing him take responsibility like that, admitting he was wrong without trying to spin it or minimize it, that's more than a lot of people ever get from those who hurt them. Does it change anything? Evelyn considered. No. Yes. I don't know. She shook her head. It doesn't give us back 9 years. Doesn't erase the damage. But maybe it gives us permission to stop carrying his guilt alongside our own pain. Meaning? Meaning he's acknowledged what he did. Publicly. Completely. We don't have to keep proving he was wrong or fighting to make people believe us. It's done. She met Caleb's eyes. We can actually move forward now without dragging the past behind us every step. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Relief, maybe. Or the beginning of it. So what do we do now? Now? Evelyn looked back toward Pine Hollow, where life continued despite personal dramas. Now we build the expansion. We run the store. We figure out what this, she gestured between them, actually is without Victor's shadow hanging over everything. That's simple? Nothing about this is simple, she said honestly. But maybe we stop making it more complicated than it needs to be. Stop waiting for the other shoe to drop or for proof that we're making a mistake. Just try. Actually try instead of just surviving. Caleb reached for her hand. She let him take it. They stood by the creek while church let out and Pine Hollow went about its Sunday business. 2 broken people holding on to each other while the town that had watched them suffer finally started watching them heal. It wasn't a happy ending. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the neat, tied-up way stories were supposed to end. But it was a beginning. And after 9 years of nothing, a beginning felt like everything. The beginning they'd claimed by the creek that Sunday turned out to be messier than either of them expected. 2 days after Victor's letter was read, Evelyn woke up angry. Not at anything specific, just angry. A bone-deep fury that made her snap at customers and throw a ledger across the storage room hard enough to crack the spine. Caleb found her there, surrounded by scattered papers and breathing hard. What happened? Nothing happened. She didn't look at him. Everything's fine. Evelyn, I said I'm fine. The words came out sharp as broken glass. Just leave me alone. He didn't leave. Instead, he sat on a crate, giving her space but staying present. The silence stretched taut between them until Evelyn couldn't stand it anymore. I'm angry at him, she said finally. At Victor. At his stupid letter and his clean confession, and the way everyone in town is acting like his apology makes everything okay. Her voice cracked. 9 years, Caleb. 9 years of my life gone because he couldn't handle his feelings like an adult. And all he has to do is write a letter, and suddenly he's the tragic figure who made a mistake? Nobody thinks that, don't they? She laughed bitterly. Martha Blackwell told me yesterday that it must be hard for Victor, living with what he did, living with it, like that's somehow comparable to what we lost. Caleb absorbed this quietly. You're allowed to be angry. I know I'm allowed. Evelyn finally looked at him. But I also know I can't live in this anger forever. Can't let it poison everything we're trying to build. So I'm stuck between fury and forced forgiveness, and I don't know how to navigate that. Maybe you don't have to choose. He said it carefully. Maybe you can be angry and still move forward, hold both things at once. That sounds exhausting. Probably is. Caleb stood, moved closer. But pretending you're fine when you're not? That's more exhausting. Trust me, I spent 9 years doing it. The truth of that landed. Evelyn had been so focused on appearing strong, on proving she could handle everything, that she'd forgotten strength could also mean admitting when you couldn't. I hate this, she said quietly. Hate that he still has this much power over how I feel. Then take the power back. Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. Stop giving him space in your head. Be angry today. Scream if you need to. Throw things. Whatever gets it out. Then tomorrow, choose to focus on what we're building instead of what he destroyed. It sounded simple. It probably wasn't. But standing in the storage room with papers scattered around her feet and 9 years of suppressed rage finally finding voice, Evelyn decided to try. She screamed, not words,